So where we start tonight is this. How does AEW best keep this momentum going coming out of Revolution and then into Dynamite, which also saw the debut of the newest member of not just the AEW roster, the Elites, in Okada?
That's the thing. So we found out April 21st, you have Dynasty in St. Louis. So another new pay-per-view coming up. Big Business is next week. So we're expecting in 6 days' time, Mercedes Moné to make her AEW debut. There is a lot of momentum. There was general consensus on Twitter of, wow, this might be the best ever AEW pay-per-view. Every match delivered outside of the 8-man, every single match delivered on that night. And this is the hottest AEW's felt in a while, but we've seen so much with AEW, whether it comes with booking or matches and sometimes injuries, where they are so hot and then they just sort of come down a little bit. They've got to keep riding right now. The thing at the top of my list, we talked about it last week, the world title. I thought Swerve was going to win last week. He somehow did not win and got more over. That place was rocking last night for him in Duluth or wherever they were. Like, they were excited for Swerve.
They kept saying Atlanta, Duluth. Like, they kept mixing up it, whatever they were calling it, which was weird, but whatever.
In Georgia last night, they were excited for Swerve. So to me, the way you keep it moving, you got to put the belt on him. It seems like we're going Joe versus Swerve at Dynasty because next week is Joe and Wardlow already. So you talk about it was a good thing Wardlow won, but I think he's losing next week. And I don't want to see another 3-way at the pay-per-view. Put the world title on Swerve right now. He's hot. He's your most over babyface. Ride it to the moon, and let's see what we got going right now.
I mean, that being said, like, I mean, Greensboro also loved themselves as Samoa Joe. Like, Joe was super over in Greensboro on Sunday night. Like, I don't want to completely dismiss Samoa Joe.
Sure. No, Joe is great, but come on, it's Swerve's time.
I mean, I'm curious to see where they go with it. I mean, if it is Swerve versus Joe in St. Louis, like, yes, then Swerve has to win. But if they can find a way to push it off further, if, Hangman Adam Page comes back and they have another match, those two, much like the Young Bucks and the Lucha Bros, they're in Fight Forever territory. Like, yep, just heat it up and I am going to sit back and enjoy the hell out of it. Like, that's just the way that feud goes. So if they do another Hangman versus Swerve match at that pay-per-view and then push it off to Double or Nothing, I'd be okay with that too. Like, I think there's a way to do it. But the next time that Swerve challenges Joe, yes, Swerve has to go over. I'm 100% with you there. And speaking of Double or Nothing, I feel like I always come back to it because it felt like in 2022 they had this. This was the last time I felt this way about AEW with all the momentum they had coming out of a pay-per-view was Double or Nothing. And they had a couple of things work against them. They had injuries with, Bryan Danielson, injuries with CM Punk, and, just then they kind of dropped some things because they decided they really needed to make the push for Forbidden Door, and they dropped some AEW storylines. So there were a number of different things that kind of led to that momentum slowing down. But it feels like, especially with the addition that they're making, that some of these things can really start heating up with Mercedes Moné, as you mentioned, with Okada, the Elites. But this was something that I think that they can do in terms of sustaining the momentum and maybe putting together better dynamites. And I don't know why this didn't hit me before, and it just kind of hit me for the first time last night with the way they started the show with Swerve coming out and then Joe, and then they have the match. They very rarely give multiple segments to any storyline. Like, maybe they'll advance some sort of storyline with a quick backstage segment like we saw with Toni Storm last night, Mariah May getting her first t-shirt, teasing the Tony Awards with an eye, because, again, they don't want to get sued.
Of course. Got to be safe there.
Yeah, no, of course. We got to make sure everything's buttoned up there. But very rarely, and the one thing that WWE does, especially, they do it on Raw because they've got 3 hours in one night and it's a lot, but there's always the through line of, like, the most important thing. Like let's just say with the Bloodline. With the Bloodline, a lot of times, if they're going to be the last segment, Roman Reigns isn't wrestling on TV. That's just not the way it works. But you have multiple segments of, Paul Heyman backstage, and they're doing all these different things. And the Bloodline is like the through line of SmackDown. Or Cody Rhodes right now is the through line. Or you see multiple segments with the Judgment Day. they're always, it's very rarely, oh, this is the Intercontinental segment.
Right.
This is going to be the women's segment. This is going to be the World Championship segment. And you're seeing the convergence of a lot of those storylines and with what happened at the end of Monday Night Raw. So last night for the first time, and they just kind of gave it the first half hour. But I think that's something that they could do, because one of our biggest complaints with AEW is a lot of times the AEW World Championships feels like it's dragging you down.
Sure.
Make Samoa Joe more important. You feature him multiple times throughout the show. Feature him in the first hour and the second hour. Feature Swerve in the first hour and the second hour. Like, make sure you take what the important things are and kind of have that through line of your show. I think that's going to be really important in terms of AEW keeping the momentum going. If people are loving Swerve Strickland, let's give him Swerve Strickland. Let's give him, a promo at the beginning of the show and then a main event match at the end. And last night still ended up being kind of segmented because that was kind of put in the corner of the first half hour of the show. And then, you just kind of segmented it the rest of the way, which ended in a fantastic main event match. But like, you just don't have, despite having all these factions and all these things that can interact with each other, very rarely do they interact with each other.
Yeah, that's interesting when you put it that way, because even last night, like with that 2 segment from the world title, we got an impromptu match, which we don't often see on Dynamite. Like getting that tag match that was not pre-advertised, like that is something different. So you had that going. The other thing, which I don't know if it's a positive or negative, like a lot of times we see variety in their main events. Like you talk about the way Raw and SmackDown do it. We know the Bloodline's going to be there. We know Jey Uso, Cody, Drew. You can pick and choose. The people, the players are going to be in the main events of those shows. You can't do that with AEW. And last night we got Ospreay, which is definitely one of their prized toys right now. But you got a Kyle Fletcher, who, is not. Like, he's the Ring of Honor television champion. He's a tag team guy. And like you said, put on a hell of a match. But there isn't that story and that intrigue of like, ooh, I want to see him versus Will Ospreay. And we get the thing at the end with Bryan. But they're doing a good job right now. There's so many stories. Like, we are a month and a half out from Dynasty, the first ever. And you can almost put together a card right now that will be one hell of a card. You got Joe versus Swerve. They do Ospreay versus Bryan. Maybe the end of the tag tournament, like Mercedes and Serena Deeb. Like, there is stuff there that you're like, all right, let's go. They're doing a better job at telling stories and building out pay-per-views, which is something we've knocked them for in the past.
Yeah, but I would like to have that main event mean something more. And look, I mean, again, and this is not a complaint about what they did last night, because you're going to put Will Ospreay in the main event. Like, if Will Ospreay is willing to put on that match for free on television, you just let him do it, right? But I just want to see that through line. Like, okay, if you want Will Ospreay, because here's the thing, they have so many good damn wrestlers on that roster.
Right.
You can kind of rotate through of the thing of the night. But I think you can kind of highlight some different things and then have these matches at the end. I just think being able to highlight more instead of just like trying to get everybody in, because that's AEW's problem right now.
Right.
Their pay-per-views get a little long because they're trying to jam everybody in, which is why we had an 8-man all-star slugfest, whatever they ended up calling it on Sunday night, which didn't need to happen. Like, you could have just completely gotten rid. I mean, you could have done that match on Collision to give, especially if you're just going to have Wardlow wrestle on a Dynamite for this, right? Like, it's not setting up anything major. It's not like a Money in the Bank or a Royal Rumble or anything like that. So you could have done that on Collision to give Collision a little bit more juice. So I want to see whether it's Collision, whether it's Dynamite. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do it on Revolution, on Rampage.
Right, yeah.
Because the Rampage formula works. Banger match in the beginning, a couple of filler matches, banger match at the end, and you get through your hour of television. But with Collision and with Dynamite, I think if they start featuring more people, I think they've got an opportunity to really start highlighting Swerve, really start highlighting Danielson, Mox, Joe, MJF when he comes back, Okada, the Elite, Omega when he comes back. Like, I think you've got an opportunity where you can do that instead of just trying to keep everything in its like proper place.